Good evening, everyone. I just thought I would pop in real quick while we wait for others to show up for the class tonight. My name is Dana Ford, and I'll be leading the program tonight, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself in just a bit. So this is the Owls of New York class, and I'm with Braddock Bay Raptor Research. For those of you who are not familiar with our organization, I did put our website address in the chat, so you can go check that out while you're waiting for the next couple of minutes, but we should be getting started very shortly. We're just about a minute away from showtime. Okay. Okay, good evening, everyone. We're at 6:01 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I want to thank the Central Library for inviting me here to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is the owls of New York State. I am the president of Braddock Bay Raptor Research. My name is Dana Ford, and I've been with the organization for about oh geez, over 30 years now. So I've been working with birds of prey in a variety of settings. We study these birds in the wild through our Hawk Watch, our Raptor banding program, and also some of our surveying and habitat management that we do for owls. So owls are right up our alley. And then we do a lot of education as well. And this is just one example of some of the programming that we do. So I was very happy to be invited out tonight to present to you about the owls of New York State. Um, this program is being recorded, so keep that in mind. I think everyone is muted and videos are off at the moment, but please feel free to pop the questions in the chat and I will do my best to go back to it as we get through the slideshow and answer questions the best I can. I'm monitoring everything tonight, so I don't have any help monitoring the chat. So please be patient with me if I don't quite get to your questions, but I promise to do my best. At the end of the slideshow, you're going to get to meet a very special guest. One of our education raptors, one of our owls. So that's always the big draw and the very special treat for you at the end to really kind of come together and summarize all the stuff we're going to learn about owls. So still admitting a few people here, but looks like we've got a good crowd. If you have any difficulty hearing me, please unmute yourself and let me know because I don't have anyone else if you want to give me that feedback at the moment. All right, so owls of New York State. We have 11 species of owls that can be found in our state at one time or another, one season or another. Some are year-round residents, like the top row here. We have the great horned owl, the screech owl, barred owl, and barn owl. Then we also have some birds that are migratory, so they're only here at certain during certain seasons or certain months of the year. That represents our middle row here with the northern saw-whet owl, the long-eared owl, and the short-eared owl, which is a bit nomadic in its movements. And then we have four Arctic species or subarctic species that tend to visit sorry, emitting people um, with varying numbers during the winter time. So we have birds that specifically will show up here in our state in the winter months, getting away from where it's even colder up in their parts of the world. So I'm going to go through and give you a little overview of the species that you can see, when you can see them, and some tips for looking for owls, as well as some of the neat characteristics, what I like to call sometimes superpowers, that these birds possess for being very successful and surviving out there in the wild. Now, let me see if I can advance my slides. There. So for those of you, again, who are not familiar with our organization, Braddock Bay Raptor Research is a nonprofit organization. We were founded back in 1986. So and our mission has been to conduct research on birds of prey. The raptor migration is our key focus in the springtime. We study the birds in the wild through our field programs, including the Hawk Watch, raptor banding, owl roost surveys, and habitat management. And then we take that information that we learn every year, share it with both the scientific community and the general public in a variety of ways. So research and education are at the heart of our mission. Always jams up on me. There we go. Okay, so we're going to start with some general facts about owls. Owls are certainly one group of birds that really draw people in, whether you are a bird watcher or not, or a nature nut or not. Even the average citizen has drawn to owls because of their appearance. They have human-like facial expressions and just some really unique adaptations for survival. Overall and throughout the world, there are two main families of owls, the Titanidae, which are the barn owls. So only two species in that family. Then every other species of owls is in the family of birds called the Strigidae. Most owls are nocturnal, but not all of them. Some of them can be more crepuscular, active at dawn and dusk, and some of them are active even during the day, especially the Arctic species like your snowy owls there. We're going to cover the three major adaptations for nocturnal hunting, which is vision, hearing, and their feathers and the mechanics of their flight there. When we talk about sexual dimorphism existing between males and females, that basically means there's a difference. But how we tell them apart, typically the size is what we're going by. Some species have a different coloring in male and female, but most of them look identical. And the females are almost always larger, almost up to 25% larger. They do swallow their food whole, and this is another topic that also draws some interest, especially from our kiddos, talking about what owls eat and how they need to regurgitate owl pellets or castings because they cannot digest all those parts of the animal. So some general information, maybe you knew some of these facts already coming in, but maybe something new was presented to you just now. Let's talk first about their vision. And this is one of the most remarkable things about these birds. They do have those forward-facing eyes, which helps them see in 3 dimensions really well, judge distance, and kind of calculate the distance with those eyes facing forward. they are able to, using that parallax method, kind of calculate and triangulate and pinpoint where things are coming from with those eyes. They can see in darkness, but not total darkness, not pitch blackness. They need just a tiny amount of light to help illuminate their surroundings. So if their vision doesn't work, then they rely on their hearing. But when when you look at owls, those eyes are what really draw you in, and they are very large for their body size, for their head. And one of the unique things about their eyes is they are not able to move them. They are fixed in their eye sockets. They do not have muscles to move the eyes, so they need to be able to turn their head to see things that are off center in any amount. They have extra flexibility in that neck, so they can turn their head 270 degrees out of a full circle. And this diagram at the top, the skull there, can show you from a top side view just how that range of motion works. So whether you're looking from the front, they can turn, look directly in behind them and over that other shoulder. And they can do that in both directions. This little video, I'm hoping that it's going to work for you. Let's see. The video there is showing our education great horned owl enjoying the outdoors there, and a little bit of demonstration of how far that head can turn. You'll be able to see that in real time when you meet her in a little while there. So they can do that. They have that mobility in their neck because of the extra vertebrae they possess. They have twice as many neck vertebrae as humans. Owls have 14, we only have 7, so that makes them even more flexible. If they cannot, if their vision is impaired a little bit, whether it's because it is a very dark night or maybe they're hunting over 2 feet of snow, they do have exceptional hearing as well. And their hearing is a sense that's really relied upon to spot things, listen for danger, but also listen for their prey at night. Their ear openings are interesting because they're asymmetrical in 3 dimensions, which means you have one ear kind of up high and towards the front of the skull, and the other one will be down lower and up towards the back. This off-centeredness, this asymmetry, helps them pinpoint more accurately where the sounds are coming from. And the facial disc of the feathers around the owl's eyes acts to help kind of draw that sound and focus it right into the ear canal. The bottom picture is showing you a little saw-whet owl's head side view. This would be the edge of its facial disc, those white speckling there. And the person's finger is just gently pushing the flap of that facial disc there so you can see the ear opening right at the side of their head, right behind their eyes. So they use those facial discs like a satellite dish to focus the sound, and they're able to catch things without even having to see it. Another attribute that helps them be very successful night hunters, the more nocturnal species have very, very soft feathers, especially the edges of their flight feathers on their wings. This is a close-up view of the leading edge of one of a great horned owl's wing, which shows you how the edging is broken up into these almost hair-like projections, like they look like eyelashes, and that fringed edge helps to break up the air moving over the wing and silence it. So they have the ability to fly without making any sound at all, which is definitely an advantage when you're trying to listen for prey and sneak up on that food. And also allows you to hear better. You don't have your wings making a lot of noise in your ears while you're trying to listen. So silent flight is very important to these birds too. Okay, we're going to go through species now. And if you don't recognize this one, many people do. This is one of our largest owls, and you're going to get to meet one of these birds at the end of the slideshow. Our great horned owl, named because of their size. Great usually refers to something on the large side of things, and horn because of the tufts of feathers that stick up off the top of their head. They are neither horns or ears, but they are useful in both communication with others, but also for camouflage and helping them blend in with their environment. This is one of our most common owls throughout North America. There are year-round resident in our state and very, very hardy birds. They do begin nesting in the middle of winter around here. So it's a kind of an amazing thing that any bird or any animal would choose to raise their young in the middle of winter in Rochester. But they are very adapted for that kind of climate. Even though they're adapted for cold weather, they are also found on a variety of habitats all across North America, from the desert to the woodlands to the cities even. So this is going to be one of those owls that you will find in city parks. They are a hoot owl, and their call sounds a bit like hoo, 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 hoo. But it's not the only sound they make. They do make some screeches and some hisses and some cat-like sounds too. Here's a few more images of great horned owls for you, with a little description of kind of their field markings, their coloration, their size, to give you an idea there. They do have kind of a white X that comes from the eyebrows across their nose there. That's kind of a good field mark to look for when you're looking at all the tufted owls. Their ear tufts or feather tufts are set pretty wide on their head as well. And they have this whitish bib that often shows up pretty clearly. Now, the picture on the top right is of an adult with two branchers, call them. The birds that have just left the nest, and we call that branching. They're exploring, they're not quite flighted yet. And this is a stage of life that is very, very vulnerable for them. So mom and dad do usually still keep a close eye on them while they're learning the ropes. And this is one of my best owl photos. I can't take credit for most of the photos in this slideshow, but this is often how you're going to see owls out there, just silhouetted, especially in the daytime. You're going to want to look for that shape, but you can see how that shape and those feather tufts help kind of break up the silhouette of the bird and help them blend in with the branches even more. Speaking of trying to blend in, now this might not look like an owl to you, it might look a little alien-like. This little guy is a fledgling eastern screech owl that we had come across very unexpectedly on this side of our street, just hanging out on the fence. Must have recently left the nest. It was standing up tall and skinny, trying to do its best imitation of a tree branch, but was not too successful in that. But this is a young eastern screech owl. They're very downy, covered with feathers. Not quite got a lot of its adult feathers in yet, but this is what they will look like when they are full grown. The eastern screech owl is another one of our very common year-round residents in our area. Can be found again in a variety of habitats, and they're very small owls, just about the size of a soda can. They're very tiny, kind of look like a miniature great horned owl with those feather tufts. So they also are one of those owls that have feather tufts to help them with their camouflage. They are a cavity nester, so they depend on hollow trees and old woodpecker holes and that kind of thing for their nest sites. You can also build nest boxes and to help these birds out with nest sites and attract them to your property. These are not a hoot owl. They are birds that make some very interesting sounds. One of their main calls is that of a whinnying sound, and they sound like a horse whinnying, and they have a whistle and tremolo. So sometimes not all owls are hoot owls, and you see some very interesting sounds from these birds. Couple more images of screech owls kind of showing that cavity dwelling behavior. They'll use cavities not only for nesting, but for roosting in the wintertime when they need to find cover. So the top photo is a nice natural cavity there with two birds in there, and you can see two of the color variations that these birds come in. These are both eastern screech owls. These just happen to come in a variety of colors. Red morph, which is like the one on the left, and a gray morph. There's also an intermediate brown morph now, but which is not very common. But these are the two most common morphs or color morphs of the birds there. It doesn't tell you whether they're male or female or how old they are. They just happen to come in a couple colors, which probably aids a little bit in camouflage with their different environments. The photo down here on the right will show you how these birds will use the nest boxes. And when it's a nice sunny day, even in the middle of winter, poke their head out, get a little bit of sunshine, or right as it gets to be just before dusk, they'll start to come out and put their heads in the hole and look around and get a gander of the surroundings and wait for the cover of darkness to leave and go out and hunt. So the next year-round resident is our barred owl. The barred owl has those big, beautiful, dark eyes. Unlike the screech owl and the great horn that have the yellow eyes, these birds have beautiful dark brown eyes. And they are called the barred owl because of the horizontal striping on the neck area there. That's called barring in the world of birds identification. These birds are also found all over North America. They do tend to like a little bit of a wetter habitat. So sometimes they're found near wetter woodlands and swampy areas more often. They need really large cavities for nesting. Most owls don't build any kind of nest. They either use cavities or they borrow from other existing structures or organisms like other hawks and birds and squirrels. That's what great horned owls will use, though their nests that are already existing, as well as barred owls. So they are one of our hoot owls, and their sound resembles the phrase, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" I do not do very good owl impressions, so I apologize for that, but it is a really fun thing to hear. And if you get a couple of them, a pair going back and forth, they do get to be very raucous and sound a lot like a bunch of monkeys having a good old time. But the barred owl is a very beautiful bird here. And this picture up at the left is a photo that was taken in the Owl Woods part of Braddock Bay a few years ago. And this is how we do want to come upon our owls when we spot them during the day, nice and sleepy, getting the rest they need during the day so they can be well rested for nighttime activity, and especially if they're migrating. So this is a sleepy barred owl here. And you can see how they will stay very close to the tree trunk usually. That also helps them hide there. Okay. Now we're getting into our migrants, some of the birds that are not here year-round that are migrate through. At Braddock Bay, we have a very big migration of northern saw-whet owls and long-eared owls, which will be the next species I present. But the northern saw-whet owl, take a look at that little cutie. Don't let those cuteness fool you. They are still very tough and fierce predators, very good mousers. They eat a lot of voles and rodents. So they're also, of course, very good to have around. These little saw-whet owls are smaller than a screech owl, so smaller than a soda pop can. They're very tiny. They do nest in cavities, but in the wintertime, in the spring migration, when they're coming through, especially along the lakeshore in the Braddock Bay area, they rely on the evergreens for cover, and that's where you'll find them roosting during the day and getting their rest. So they're called the saw-whet owl because their call sounds like the whetting or the filing of a saw. It's a very repetitive one note toot, 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 over and over and over again. So that's whoever first discovered this bird, that's what they felt was the best name for it. And it resembled that mechanical sound of whetting a saw. Here's a couple of other photos, images of saw-whet owls that we have documented in the owl woods at Braddock Bay. Sometimes they do take a little risk even in the winter and come out and get some sunshine to warm up. This bird on the right was actually right on the edge of the trail at Braddock Bay, getting some well-needed warmth and sun. This one on the lower end of the slide there is a little more alert and a little more aware of our presence in this picture. But these birds do tend to stay put when you happen upon them. They don't want to draw much attention to them because of their size, because they could become potential prey for other larger predators. So when you approach them respectfully, you usually are rewarded with a nice look, nice view there. But these are a bird that do not have the tufts or the feather tufts or horns like the great horned owl. Tuftless owl there. Beautiful facial disc, little whitish eyebrows as well, kind of a cinnamon streaking on the chest there. So we will see the saw-whet owls show up first during migration in the spring. They usually start to come through in late February. And then as we get into March, we will have some long-eared owls show up and travel through. The long-eared owl pictured here is about the size of a crow. They look a lot bigger than they really are because they have a pretty long wingspan, about 3.5, 4 feet wide. They're similar looking to the great horned owl, but if you notice how much more slender in appearance these birds are, and their feather tufts, those long quote unquote ears, are much closer together on their head than a great horned owls would be. So again, these are not ears, they are just feather projections. Oh, phyloplumes, I believe is the technical term for them. And they're aiding in helping them blend in with their surroundings. So these are birds that will travel through during migration. We don't have many that nest in our area. They'll go a little further up into more forested areas for that. But you will find them in groups sometimes, especially during migration season. We'll have multiple long-eared owls together in the same area of trees. So that can be fun to happen upon. I always think they have a little surprised look on their faces, of course, when they're watching you. They're very alert. Both of these photos with those eyes wide open. One of the things that's that is interesting about these birds that have the feather tufts when they fly, the photo in flight shows you how those feather tufts go flat on their head. So you don't see that those projections in flight there. Check this. Okay. So a question just popped up in the chat about, do owls travel in groups or are they solitary? They tend to be pretty solitary in migration season, but they're also coming, and the timing of things, they show up at the same time. They're not going to be working necessarily cooperatively as they fly through an area during migration, but they too tend to show up in numbers, and especially so there's a peak time of year when we'll see the most owls coming through. And as I mentioned earlier, typically we do see saw-whets kind of solitary on their own in their own roost site. You won't ever really have two saw-whet owls in the same tree, but long-eared owls will tolerate each other. They will roost together, and sometimes there's strength in numbers there when you talk about species doing that. Okay. Let me get this off. There we go. Now, a close cousin to the long-eared owl is the short-eared owl, but similar in size, but very different in a lot of ways. This owl is an endangered species in New York State. They are a grassland bird, and they nest on the ground. So they depend on really extensive tracts of grassland or meadow type habitat for nesting. You can see just by the coloring of this bird how they are built to blend in with that type of habitat. They're very pheasant-like in their markings and their coloring. So when they're on the ground nesting, they're very well hidden. The short-eared owls I mentioned as being endangered because grasslands in our state and open habitat like that is very rare. That is part of the reason why these birds numbers have been in decline. We do see them more often in the winter months, though. There are some really popular areas where these birds winter, and you'll have sometimes several in an area roosting, and then they come out and hunt the fields, usually around farmlands, in some of the agricultural areas. That's where you're going to find these birds in the winter. And so you can see sometimes multiple birds come out and hunt. And what's nice about these birds is they, for us at least, they are crepuscular. So they're active a little more at dusk and dawn. So around 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the winter months is when these birds start to get active. So it's still daylight for us, and it's a little easier for us to spot and watch and observe them. So they're can be they're very much a sought after species when it comes to birders and photographers, but it is really a lot of fun and very interesting to watch their hunting behavior. Short-eared owl, they have really, really tiny ear tufts or feather tufts that almost sometimes they don't even show up. This bird is showing just a little bit of those tufts sticking up there. Really long wings. As you can see, you can barely see the tail on this bird, but the wing goes all the way down to the edge here, past the barbed wire it's sitting on. There's an image of what they look like in flight. They use those big, beautiful facial discs. They usually have their heads facing down over the meadows and over the grassland, listening for those small animals there to try to catch them with the hearing as well as their vision there. So we sometimes see these birds, we have documented them during spring migration, flying through at the hawk watch. When we do our raptor migration count, because they are more active during the day, sometimes we have a couple that will be migrating through with the hawks, which is kind of neat to see as well. Okay. Now, this is a fan favorite for a lot of people, thanks to Harry Potter movies, of course, too. The snowy owl, unmistakable, with a big white face. The snowy owl is one of our winter visitors here. They are what we term eruptive. So their numbers are not reliable year after year after year. The number of snowy owls that we see every winter really we've learned that it depends a lot on how the breeding season has done up north. So when they have a very successful breeding season in the summer, the following fall/winter is when we tend to see the most snowy owls come down this far south, and even sometimes even further south to spend the winter here with us. Rochester and Monroe County have a lot of great places to look for snowy owls. They do frequent the lakeshore and the piers, like in Charlotte, even at Braddock Bay and Irondequoit. So those are some of the places you might find snowies in the winter, plus in the airport as well, and a lot of our open agricultural land. So those types of habitats, especially the airport and the agricultural lands, resemble the tundra for them. They like those wide open spaces. And as long as there's good numbers of rodents and sometimes other birds, that's where they're going to find them spending a lot of time. Okay. So a couple more photos and some more identifying characteristics for these birds. In fact, this one, the photo up at the top left, is a snowy that was photographed in Charlotte, right along the lakeshore there several years ago, but still a Rochester bird. Both of these were a former Rochester photographer there took these photos. They are large, very large owls, as large, if not sometimes larger than a great horned owl. So a very large, powerful bird, long wingspan. You can just make out those fluffy talons. Talons are the feet of these raptors. That's what they use to capture their food, their prey with. And snowy owls have feathering all down to the base of those sharp claws to help with extra insulation in their cold habitat there. They eat a variety of things. Rodents are key, especially lemmings in the breeding season, but they will also eat other birds, rabbits, ducks, and geese. That's why they hang around the lakeshore and sit on the ice floes to catch those birds too. So variety of food there. Okay, get to that in a minute. Let's see. There we go. This is one species that does have a significant difference in the coloring between males and females. The males are almost pure white, and the male is pictured here on the left. Just a little bit of dark markings, dark feathering you can make out on the wings, but otherwise when the adult males are almost pure white there. There you can get a really good view of those snowshoe-like talons there. They have all of that feathering down to the base of their toes. And the female, though, is going to be more heavily marked in blackish barring on their chest and their wings and their back there. And that helps them blend in on their nesting territory, because up on the tundra, there's no snow in the summer, so very little if there is any. And so they're on nesting on the ground in the vegetation, and that helps them to blend in. They'll also still, as the rule of thumb goes for the raptors, the females are larger than the males as well. Okay. So we've got a couple of other winter visitors to go over. The boreal owl is one of the smallest ones. And you may be saying to yourself, well, I thought we'd looked at this bird already. It looks a lot like a northern saw-whet owl, and they definitely do. But there are some key things to look for if you're looking to see if you've got a boreal owl in your sights. Boreals have a light colored bill or beak, and saw-whet owls have a black one. So that's one of the key field marks to look for. Boreals are just a little bit bigger and pudgier than a saw-whet. So we always tell our surveyors in the winter, if you think you see a really big chubby saw-whet, look twice and get a look at the face if you can and see if it might be a boreal. We did have a boreal owl in the owl woods during migration season this year. It was seen in the middle of February, and it was only here for one day because it was just passing through. It had been, I think, about 6 or 7 years since the last one we see. So they really don't show up that often, but it's always very exciting. They sometimes are found a little more in the more northern part of New York State, like a lot of our wintering visitors. There's a little bit better view, one out in the open and very alert. There, showing the light color bill. Their coloring is a little bit different than the saw-whet, and those speckles on the top of the head are more dots rather than streaks like the saw-whet has. This photo on the bottom left is a boreal from, I think 2016 or 17 was when we last had that one. But another sleepy owl, which is how we like to find them. We know we're not disturbing them there. Another very rare visitor. Another one you're more likely to see up in the North Country in New York State is the northern hawk owl. They are very active during the daytime. Like their name suggests, they have more hawk-like behaviors and appearance. They don't have as pronounced of a facial disc, as you can see. They are more diurnal, so they're not relying as heavily on their hearing as some of our more nocturnal species are. Oops, did that go away? There we go. And you'll see, I'm going to flip to the next slide just to show you that wing shape is even more like a falcon or a hawk, and so they're much more active in terms of how their hunting style goes. They are a little more powerful and active pursuit. They'll eat a lot more birds, not just small mammals there. So the northern hawk owl, I can't remember when we had the last one in the Rochester area, but it is a species that you can go look for in the winter, especially up in the North Country there. Okay, this is our last one, and I like to end this with this bird. We have some neat photo coming up here, just to illustrate the camouflage. Now the great gray owl, another possible winter visitor, is one of the world's largest owls in terms of measurement from head to toe and wingspan. But as far as weight and body mass go, they do not measure up to our great horned owls and snowy owls. They're much lighter. There's also a ton of feathering when it comes to these birds that makes up the shape of them. And they have smaller feet, so they're more of a mouser than anything. They don't take as large of prey as our snowies and the great horns, but they have these big, huge, beautiful facial discs. They're very, very useful for these birds when they're hunting, especially over snow. There are videos out there that will show these birds coursing the snowy lands and then diving into the snow and coming out with a vole or a mouse. They don't see those animals, but they can hear the tunneling that their feet make and really have very accurate hearing. So the they have that expression, you know, they look like the big wise old grandpa owl, but those facial discs, as I said, are more of a function for hearing than anything there. Yeah. Okay. The neatest thing about owls one of the neatest things is their ability to blend in and camouflage themselves. Now, this I did borrow from the internet, and maybe some of you have seen this going a few years back, but there is an owl on the left side of your screen, same tree as on the right side. You just can't see it until he turns and faces you and you see those eyes. So just remarkable camouflage these birds have. So it makes you stop and think that, you know, how many owls did I walk past in the woods? Not even know it. But that is part of their survival strategy, is to be hidden, so they can save their energy and be successful hunters out there. Oh, I lied. There's one more, of course, the barn owl. The barn owl, we have one species of barn owl in North America. And they're really not very popular or very common in our area of the state. They're more naturally found in more the southern part of New York and possibly southern interior area. They are also a bird that relies on grassland, but also more open habitat, though they do depend on cavities. And as a lot of the cat trees are taken down and there's been a loss of natural cavities, these birds have definitely taken up residence in old buildings, old structures, old barns, which is how they get their name. That they will take readily to nest boxes too now, that and as a way to encourage them to nest nearby. They're very efficient mousers. These birds eat a huge number of rodents, so they're very, very good to have around for rodent control. And in fact, in some parts of the world, it is one method that farmers will use is to encourage these birds to nest on their acreage to help with the rodent control, and have been finding it to be a very successful natural means of pest control. So something we can learn from these animals and how to keep the earth healthier by using them instead of chemicals. But they are known as the heart-shaped face owl, sometimes the monkey-faced owl. But they do have these heart-shaped facial disc there. Also a very excellent hearing for these birds. There have been studies done where they have put barn owls in a controlled setting, complete darkness, and they have been shown to be able to successfully catch mice just by listening for it. Now their calls, they are not a hoot owl. In fact, they have some of the most eerie sounds of all the animal world. They make a lot of loud hisses and screeches. And when you see just how white they are underneath, and if you know they inhabit old buildings, they are definitely responsible for some of the ghost stories out there of haunted houses. People happen upon this white figure flying silently at them, screeching and screaming. Well, that might make your hair stand up on end. Okay, another couple of pretty views. Maybe the top left one, not so appealing, but put this photo in here to show just how wide and big an owl's mouth is. And we mentioned right at the beginning of the slideshow talking about what these birds eat. They eat other animals, every part of that animal, including the fur, feathers, or bone, and often will swallow it whole if it's small enough. So this barn owl here was gulping down a chick, a day-old chick. This was a captive bird that was used in a flighted program. So we got to see this bird eat in front of us. So it's just really show you how big that wide that mouth is. Excuse me. Okay. One of the other things that I'd like to put into this is to talk about ethical observation and photography practices. And, this doesn't just apply to photographers and birders, but anyone who might be out there searching for owls. As you know, you're on this program tonight because you have a big interest in these birds. And of course, nothing is more thrilling than seeing these birds in the wild. So just kind of common sense rules to follow when you are looking for any wild animal is to always keep your approach quiet, move slowly, and be patient. Observing from a distance as best you can, watching their body language. And a couple of times I've mentioned already, this is how we like to find these birds: sleepy. We know we're not disturbing them. They're getting the rest they need to survive and be prepared for the night to come. Also put this little respect the landscape, the habitat, and others' property, and remember where you are, not just for the respect out of people who might own the habitat or the birds themselves, but also for your safety. How many times we back up or we get so enthralled in our observations that we misstep, and things can be a little dangerous and hairy. So be careful out there. last thing I want to leave you with here, when we do our own owl prowls and guided tours of the owl woods in the springtime, and we encourage you to come out and do that, we have some guidelines for viewing the owls at Braddock Bay. And so it's a lot of what we already said, being quiet and observing from a distance, limiting your time there, and limiting the photos. The more time you spend there, the more likely you are to draw attention to the bird. And especially with something small like a saw-whet, they can be potential meal for something larger, whether it's some of the hawks that are in the area or larger owls that might be nearby. And keep the habitat as you found it. We have unfortunately come across many people who have to even break branches to get that perfect view and that perfect photo. That is absolutely not a cool thing to do. It destroys the habitat and the cover that these owls need to be able to hide. But above all, be respectful of the habitat and the owl's need for that need to rest and fuel up especially during migration season there. Okay, I'll leave you also with a few resources while I go through the chat, and I'll try to answer some of those questions now. There's a ton of information out there about owls, and here's some of my favorite websites as well. And there's even one on owl pellets. You can do a virtual owl pellet dissection and learn all about the different bones of the animals and things that owls might be eating. So let me check the chat first, and then we can also open it up for a couple of questions before you get to meet our special guest. Okay, I'm going back through here. Okay, we answered that one. Okay, aside from the barred owl, do others also bond for life? So that's a great question, and this can actually apply to a lot of the birds of prey, a lot of raptors. They do have, what I'll start off saying, they do have a high site fidelity, which means these birds tend to return year after year to the same nest site. And that means both of the pair will do that. They usually go through, a courtship behaviors before the actual mating and the nesting begins. But a lot of these birds, we say mate for life because they return to that same nest year after year. The larger species tend to have a little bit more or longer relationship in for lack of a better term, because they live a little bit longer and they would return more. But they do. If something happens to one of the pair, though, and it's early enough in the breeding season, they will look for another mate so that they can successfully nest. Okay. Do any owls live in Antarctica? I believe the answer to that is no. That's like the only place that they do not inhabit. There is Antarctica. So good question there. The other question is, do any of these owls attempt to attack humans? So that's a question also that can apply to a lot of other raptors. These birds are very protective of their nest sites. So if the only time these raptors will ever really attack a human on purpose is if they feel threatened, especially if you're near their nest site. You're much too big for them to eat. Even a small child, and our largest owls, they're much larger than anything they possibly would want to eat. So it really would be out of defense and out of concern for their own nest there. So something to keep in mind during breeding season. The larger owls more apt to do something like that. Do owls barf out their pellets? Yes, well, they regurgitate. So the pellet does come out through their mouth. And it's not the same thing as vomit either. So it's something that's put together as a package. It's not, it's undigested material, but everything else has been taken out of it, all the nutritional parts of that animal are being utilized. So it's not quite the same as vomit, when they get sick to their stomach. And they can do that too. So it does get regurgitated out of their mouth. Yes. Oh, this is a big question. And I'm going to kind of go through these together. Kat, this is from Kat. How safe is owl habitat and how will climate change impact them? So this is definitely something that is starting to show, the birds are starting to show behavioral changes as a result of some of the warming temperatures and habitat changeover. And I can't get into specific details for lack of time here, but certainly as the climate, especially farther north for snowy owls, for example, as the Arctic climate changes and gets warmer, the timing of when everything else in that food web blooms or grows or breeds is thrown off. And so that certainly can affect the overall quality of the habitat and how much food they can find, and then how successful they will be as a nesting bird. So, and we have seen some changes in some migratory behaviors too, and this is not an owl species, but specifically with red-tailed hawks around here, and shows our migration numbers have kind of declined. But our wintering bird and breeding bird numbers are either stable or increasing. So their migration is changing. They're not traveling as much as they used to. And certainly that could play a part in certain ecosystems. Raptors in general are, indicators of how healthy a habitat is because they're predators. They're at the top of the food chain. So with their presence and their numbers, their populations indicate whether everything else is healthy below it. So it's part of why we pay attention to these birds, as of course, humans at the top of the food chain as well. Anything that's in the environment that's affecting them could possibly affect us. So we want to pay attention to these raptors. Okay, couple more quick questions here. There's a question about the recording. Yes, I believe the recording will be shared. And would they attack a squirrel? Yeah, squirrels are definitely on the menu for some of the larger species of owls, like great horned owls and barred owls specifically. And long-eared owls will take red squirrels for sure. So yeah, if you're one that's looking for a way to control your squirrel population, maybe encouraging owls is a good thing to do. Okay, so we are getting up to that point where I'm going to get ready to share with you our great horned owl, which is one of our education birds. I need to go off camera real quick to go get her. So while I'm doing that, it'll just take me just a minute or two to get set. I'm going to share with you to occupy your time an owl cam, a nest cam from Montana. And I've been watching this today. It's been a lot of fun. Let's see if it works. Hopefully it worked for you. So this is a nest cam live feed from a great horned owl nest in Montana. And there's 3 young in it right now. So hopefully you can see that. Just bear with me for a minute and I will bring out our special guest here. Okay, I'm gonna couple more little minor adjustments here and we'll be ready to go again. I'm gonna stop sharing the webcam. Let me see, it's hard for me to see my own. There, I think we got it. Okay, I can see the chat now. So if something's amiss, just let me know. But I think from my perspective, I only see myself as a little tiny person now next to a big, beautiful owl. I think you guys can see her all right. I hope you enjoyed watching those little baby great horned owls on the nest cam there. I'd like to introduce you to our great horned owl. She's looking right in the camera right now. This is one of our education birds at Braddock Bay Raptor Research. She is with us because she cannot survive on her own in the wild anymore. She did come from the wild. She was found on the ground with 2 broken wings. Amazing to be alive. But her one wing healed back to normal, but her left wing did not. So she's able to fly, but not well enough to go back to the wild. That wing healed a little bit shorter. So she flies crooked and noisy. And as you heard earlier, that silent flight is really important for these birds for surviving in the wild. They need to be able to be stealthy, sneak up on their food. So you're getting a good look at her, a little bit of the range of motion in her neck there. She's following me around, you can see. They have almost like a robotic or mechanical appearance when they're turning that head because of those fixed eyes. And she's just checking out the room. She's not in here that often, so she's checking all the nooks and crannies, listening and looking around for anything that might be unusual. But you can see her big, huge, beautiful yellow irises. And as you might notice a pupil change as she looks at different parts of the room that are brighter and darker. They're very sensitive to that change in light, but they are able to see in the daytime, like a lot of people do ask that, oh, even because they're nocturnal, can they still see in the daylight? Or does the daylight hurt their eyes? It does not. They can adjust to the different lighting and see just fine at night. I'm gonna come back up here. Yeah, get a little restless here. So this is her time. She's usually waking up to become a little more active. She doesn't sleep a solid 8 hours throughout the day, you know, that kind of thing. She's kind of more of a napper, which is true for most of these birds. They do have to kind of stay a little bit alert during the day to be able to keep a track of things going on. So she's going to be pretty alert right now, though, because this is her time, and she's probably a little hungry as well. She always waits till night to eat her food, unless I give her a mouse during the day. That she did have a mouse snack, and she gulped that down. We save her bigger meal item for later, which will be most of a rat. So that's what she eats. She has a diet very similar to what they would eat in the wild. She gets a lot of rodents, which are already killed for her. They learn to eat their prey already dead very quickly in captivity. So it's easy for them to get the calories they need. I'm not quite sure if you can see. I'm going to try to adjust the camera just a little bit without knocking it down. If you can see her talons on the perch there, she's got feathering on her toes, just not quite as extensive as the snowy owls like showed you in the photo there, but they do have feathered talons there. If you recall, this was the first species I talked about. They are very early nesting birds, and they're here all winter long, so it gives them a little extra insulation during the colder months as well. So really neat. When you're trying to find these birds, it's really difficult to find them in the day just by sight. Listening in the early evening hours, sometimes a little bit later in the winter, is when you're going to have the most success with these birds. Excuse me. They start to court or pair up in November and December. So you'll hear a lot of vocalizing going on that time of year. And one way you can tell if you have a pair in your neighborhood is listen for the different pitch of their voices. The males' hoots are a little deeper than the females. So you'll be able to know if you've got a pair nearby by listening to that duet, if you are lucky enough to hear it. I live in Mendon, and so usually around December is when I start to hear the local great horns calling. And one year we had, I think, 3 females going and a male going at the same time. It was quite a soap opera in the neighborhood. So I don't know which female won out, but that male certainly had a few to choose from. And by January, they're on nests and eggs, and usually in the early spring is when these birds are fledging, and they'll stick with mom and dad for a good few more weeks, 4 or 5 weeks while they learn the ropes out there in the wilds. This is a good time of year to be watching and listening for a lot of screech owl activity. So I know a friend of mine who lives in Honeoye Falls has a family of screechies that the young are fledged, but the mom and dad are keeping track of those babies, and because they're not quite fully mature enough or to be off on their own yet. And they're very active, right? Even in the daytime a little bit, later afternoon, early evening hours. So it's a good time of year to be listening and looking for screech owls around here. Let's see, she's a little restless here. So I'm going to try to get to those chat questions. You're going to sit for me, settle. There you go. All right, so I have a couple questions here I'll try to get to. Does she peck at a person's face like a bird was? So yeah, so a lot of people do ask that, and I am often very close to her. The beak is not the part that I worry about as much with these birds. Being raptors, their main means of defense and telling you whether they're you're not their friend is their talons. So that's why we have the tough gloves for them to sit on and grasp. But the beak can be used for tearing their food mostly. That's not to say that you can't bite. And actually for her, when she gets tired, she'll just give me a nibble on the glove. She doesn't ever go for the face. They feel more threatened the more you stare at them. So we try to keep the eye contact, to a minimal. And we've spent a lot of time together, so she knows for the most part, she can trust me. She'll let me know when she's not comfortable, and I watch that behavior and make sure she's hanging out. So she's definitely a little more restless than we usually are. She's not very used to being extended on the Zoom calls, that's for sure. So it's a little different for her. So in captivity, this question about mating and having babies, they will. We specifically only have one great horned owl, so she's not going to have any babies to care for. But it is something that if their setting is right, and the conditions are right, and there's a good comfort level, birds will mate and breed in captivity there. She actually, even though we know she's a female, she does not lay eggs. Every season we have one of our female hawks does. So it's really an individual bird thing. Depends on how comfortable, I guess, they feel and how the hormones go in captive settings there. Let's see what else we got here. How long is incubation for the eggs? It's right around, about 4 weeks or so, give or take, for different species. So it's a good amount of time they have to sit there and incubate the eggs. And if you get a chance to go back to that webcam on the great horned owls, I'll share that link. I'll try to remember to share that link with you before I go. You might notice there's a different size in the babies. There's definitely 3 different sizes there. These eggs hatch asynchronously, which means once incubation starts, as soon as the first egg is laid. So that, and eggs are laid usually a couple days apart. So that first one to hatch is going to have a little advantage over its siblings in size, because it's going to get a chance to grow a little bit before the rest of them join the world. So that's something that's very noticeable with raptors. Oh, thank you for the compliment. How old is she? And how long does she live? Okay, that's a great question. We don't know her age, because when she was injured and found out there in the wild, she was an adult already and full grown. And so once these birds reach maturity, and have their adult colors, there's really no way of knowing. She's been with us for about 6 years now. And they can live to be, great horned owls can live to be in their 30s. So we're hoping, she's got a lot more years left. She doesn't act like an elderly owl, like she's aged much, but who knows? So we'll cherish the time we have with her. Let me just put my foot there. How about that? She's so fidgety right now. She does not, we don't name our education birds, so we just call her Great Horned Owl. She does have kind of a nickname as the queen because she's our biggest bird, but we use our species names in program settings so people remember what they're seeing. And these are birds that you can see around here. So hopefully, maybe you get to recognize one on your own. She is full grown, let me ask, and this is as big as they will get. She's a female, so she's going to be on the larger side. She weighs in at about 4 pounds. And that's about the maximum, like at the top of the spectrum for great horned owls. So that's one of the reasons we were pretty certain she was a female when we first got her, because of her size, her wingspan, and her huge feet. Even on males, their feet will be a little bit smaller. And she is full grown. Question about the parents look after the offspring. Yeah, usually both the mom and the dad will look after the birds. When the female's incubating and spending a lot of time on the nest, the male's got a tough job of providing for both him and her at the same time. So he has a little extra work to do. Okay, can I explain the process of taming her? So I wouldn't use the word taming. She's definitely still very much a wild bird, but we do spend a lot of time with this training process in terms of getting her to be more comfortable. This goes with all of our education birds, comfortable in this kind of setting, an education setting, being presented in front of people, sitting on the glove. The very first step you take with these birds in getting them used and program ready is just spending time with them, sitting there, talking to them. They know you bring them their food, and getting them used to your voice and your movements. And then little by little introducing different things, like we'll put the jesses on, which are those straps that go around their legs so that we can keep them safe. We don't have to contain the owl, restrict them any other way. They learn that the glove is a place to sit. It's a new kind of perch, and it should be their safety zone. Too, when you're handling the birds, they know that when they're on the glove and they're with a handler that they're used to, that they can trust you. That's the whole goal of taming or getting these birds to feel comfortable in this kind of setting is trust. So they do get to be outdoors. She's outdoors all the time, really. They're housed outside. So she'll only come in for times when we have to do programs, and we have travel crates for them. But generally speaking, they're outdoors year round. They have an enclosure where they can choose to go into a sheltered area away from the elements or sit out in it. She actually is a bird that loves sitting in the rain. And she was a little wet when I first brought her in for this tonight, but she's dried off. But she'll sit right out in the rain because she loves to take a little shower every now and then. So So we do give them that choice. Yeah. Okay, let's see if there's any others. I think we're coming up on the end. Yep, so it's right, we're a little over that hour mark tonight, but hopefully you enjoyed all the information that was provided for you and getting to meet this big, beautiful girl. Thank you for joining the program. If you want to check out our website, Braddock Bay Raptor Research, it's bbrr.org, and you can keep tabs of us with us on Facebook and Instagram on some of the programs and some of the community events that we might be doing. So our spring season is over, but we encourage you to come out to Braddock Bay also and enjoy the scenery. Maybe next spring we'll see you at the Hawk Watch and or in the owl woods on an owl prowl. So I'm gonna go ahead and put her away. I will also, before this ends and I sign off, I will put that link to the webcam in the chat, so it'll be there, and also in the recording you'll be able to go back to it and watch those big baby greyhorns grow up. So thank you so much for coming out tonight, and have a wonderful summer.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Great. Take this off.
Yep.
All right, everyone, you can go ahead and leave the meeting when you're ready. I know that the librarians will come back on and end this for good. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And again, thank you for joining us. You can look for the recording to come your way through email, I believe, probably tomorrow or soon after. Take care.